Hi, I'm Marty Nemko. I like the idea of the short story. Um, have a whole plot and a little character development in 2 minutes. And here are are 21, the final 21 of the 79 that is in my new book, Soloists, about people who tried to make it on their own, some successfully, some not. Uh, this first one's called Do What You Love. My most vivid childhood memory was of being in a museum and repulsed that the butterflies were pinned. How could they stick a dagger in the heart of one of nature's most beautiful animals and then display it for people to gawk at? It's like if my mother stabbed me in the heart and hung me on the front lawn. And in high school, the most memorable thing I learned was that in the western U.S., where I live, over the past 4 decades, 450 butterfly species have declined at an average of almost 2% a year. So it was no surprise that when people asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I said entomologist, so I can save butterflies. I was worried that because I was just a B student, I couldn't make it as an entomologist. But I was inspired by the marine biologist who visited my class and urged everyone to follow your dream. My favorite TV show was Oprah, and many guests echoed that idea. Dream it and you can do it. The last line of a video interview of an astronaut was, shoot for the moon. Even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. So in looking for a college, I searched for California colleges that offered an entomology major. There was UC Davis, but my grades and test scores were well below its average. But I applied just in case. Then there was UC Riverside, which was possible. Alas, I was rejected from both and had to go to my safe school, San Diego State, which didn't offer an entomology major, so I declared a major in biology. Alas, I struggled with introduction to biology for majors. As inspiration, I made my computer's wallpaper, do what you love, the money will follow. I joined a study group. I asked the professor for help during office hours, and he sent me to the tutoring center. I studied hard, including staying up late the night before tests, and to my relief, I got a B+ in the course. But in inorganic chemistry, despite even more studying, all the slogans and all my affirmations that I was badass, I got only a C+. And I was facing the even harder organic chemistry, physics, and calculus before even being allowed to take Intro to Entomology. To help remind me why I was doing all this work, I searched the internet to find a summer internship involving butterflies, and was delighted to learn that the National Butterfly Association sponsors butterfly counts throughout California, including one in so-called Butterfly Valley, and I signed up. After an exhausting but rewarding day counting the declining monarch butterflies, my fellow volunteers and I recounted the day and talked of our dreams. Could we all make a living as an entomologist? After some months or years, will we still feel passionate about butterflies? We disagreed about a lot of that, but we were unanimous in feeling we would never pin a butterfly. Driving back home, I had much to think about. Should I follow my passion? If I dream it and work hard, can I actually do it? If I do what I love, will the money follow? Should I do it even if the money doesn't follow? Anyway, that story is called Do What You Love. The next one is called Mother of the Bride. From the first minute, Janet didn't like Dennis. She saw her daughter, Grace, fall prey to his bad boy looks and demeanor, something Janet herself had done 3 times and swears never again. So it particularly hurt Janet to see Grace be the same idiot. Janet tried everything. After their first date, Grace came home and asked how she liked Dennis. That is how Janet did. And Janet wanted to yell, "Are you crazy?" But Janet deliberately pursed her lips and evenly said, "How do you like him?" Janet prayed that one of them would break it off, but they got closer. Janet realized that discouraging them risked Grace doing the opposite. It could even damage the mother-daughter relationship. Then, Grace came home flashing an engagement ring, whereupon Janet figured she had little to lose. She said, "Even when I went out to dinner with the two of you, I saw his roving eye, and he epitomizes the sleazy salesman. He even bragged about how he manipulates customers to buy. And he doesn't seem to care much about you. To be honest, I think the main thing he likes is your body." Not surprisingly, Grace stormed out. A few minutes before the ceremony, Janet followed the tradition of joining Grace in her bridal boudoir. Janet realized it was too late to say anything about Dennis, so she just praised Grace's appearance. "I just love your hair, and the tiara is the perfect finishing touch. That dress looks amazing on you. I'm so glad you decided to splurge on a professional makeup artist." When the minister intoned, "Until death do you part," Janet forced herself to maintain that manufactured smile. Then the minister asked, "If anyone believes why Dennis and Grace should not be joined in holy matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." Janet thought of all the movies she had seen in which someone stopped the wedding. She thought, doing that would be the greatest wedding present I could give my daughter. But Janet just pursed her lips again, though she quickly realized that would look bad. So she pasted that smile back on her face until she was back in her car. So that one's called Mother of the Bride. This next one is called The First Date. After an entertaining college life, which, extended a couple of years after college, I decided I'd like to get married and have kids. But I didn't have much of a network to use to get set up, so I relied on Match.com. To increase my chances of finding Ms. Right, I did the reaching out myself, rather than waiting. That way I picked out who I wanted to see rather than responding, which could have tempted me to say, "Oh, what the hell, I'll see her once," and then tempted to compromise. And if she didn't respond, a woman didn't respond within 48 hours, or the response seemed shallow or generic, I moved on. There are millions of fish in the Match.com sea. Elena passed the pretests, so I was excited at the Starbucks waiting for her. Would she look anything like her picture? Would she be as caring as she seemed in her texts and phone call? Would we have chemistry? And then Elena, a little tentatively, walked in. I was relieved that her face looked like her picture, although she was a little heavier. I felt guilty that bothered me, and I wondered whether that reaction is evolutionarily hardwired or a socially constructed bias. After just a bit of small talk, I couldn't resist bringing up the marriage and baby thing. "So, you wrote that you're interested in a long-term relationship. What are you envisioning?" I couldn't bring myself to say the words marriage or children, but she did say them, almost matter-of-factly. "Oh, I'm looking to meet a husband and have 2, maybe even 3 kids." It felt too early to get into the details about that, so I changed the subject. I like to get the bad news out of the way, so I said that I'm not sure I'm ready to give up my dream of being a screenwriter. What do you think of that? Her face seemed to drop a little. I stayed silent, and waiting her out worked. She said, "Well, actually, I'm not so sure about my own career. I'm working in a nonprofit's PR department, but that feels too far from helping people. I really don't know what I want to be when I grow up, and I'm supposed to be grown up already, or at least sort of grown up." I liked that we were equally confused. We talked a little more about family and hobbies. We both liked travel and bicycling, and I decided I wanted to see her again. I wanted to end our first date while I was ahead, or at least not behind. So although we had talked only 20 minutes, I said, "Elena, I need to go." That was so clumsy a wording, but I couldn't think of anything better. I appreciated her response. "Did I do anything to turn you off?" I said no, and reflexively took her hand. I'd like to see you again if you would." Kind of flatly, she said, "Okay." Was she just nervous, or was she just not that into me? I got up, and then she did. Now, how do I say goodbye? Do I kiss her? No, that felt too fast. Do I hug her? For how long? I looked her in the eye, saw that she didn't flinch or step back, so I awkwardly hugged her, my chest barely touching her chest. I was tempted to pat her on the back the way platonic friends hug, but I resisted that. But I'm sure that was the worst hug she ever got. That was 42 years ago. We've been married for 40 years, have 2 kids and 4 grandchildren. I sell insurance and write screenplays for fun, knowing full well they'll never be made into a movie. That's somehow freeing. I write what I want. Elena is now in her 25th year as executive director of a nonprofit that takes urban kids on bicycling adventures. While our first date was good, I'm not sure I could have predicted all that. Anyway, that story is called First Date. The next story is called Throwing. Our 2-year-old woke again in the middle of the night, thanks to the noise from the adjacent apartment. My polite request to the neighbors sometimes met with, "I'm sorry, I'll stop," but the noise would soon start again. One neighbor said, "You gotta let me live." And another one frightened me. He was silent, but stared at me with scary eyes that said, "You will leave me alone." That was, well, too lively a building for me and my wife, who was pregnant in her 8th month with our second child. But even though I was a professional minor league baseball player, AA players are paid less than I was earning as a substitute teacher. So my wife and I were happy when I got a call from the AAA team's manager. That's the highest minor league. "We're going to bring you up. I think you have potential. Good slider, great control, and we'll work with you." It would only be an extra $150 a week, but it was something. And besides, that's the final step before the majors, where most players make $500,000 a year or more, some much more. I wondered what the AAA team would work with me on, and it didn't take long to find out. The manager said, "Your fastball ain't that fast, and you got pinpoint control, so batters aren't afraid of you. They dig in, wait for a pitch they can hit, and boom. You got to scare them, occasionally throw right at them. That'll loosen them up." I hated that. I didn't want to win by scaring people, but I was scared that if I didn't throw at batters, at least occasionally, I would get sent back down to AA. So I rationalized that I wouldn't hurt him much if I eased up when I threw at him. And that worked well enough. My ERA improved to a decent, but still not good, 3.92. That ERA wasn't enough to stay in AAA, let alone to have a shot at the majors, so I was vulnerable to the manager's next ultimatum. The manager said, "Our trainer created this oil, scuff stuff, to put in a corner of your glove's pocket. It's just glove oil mixed with a little sand. When you rub the ball against it, it makes your pitches dipsy-do and harder to hit. And if the umpire starts coming to the mound to see if you doctored the baseball, you just use your finger to rub that part of the pocket harder, and by the time the ump reaches you, the sand has fallen to the ground, and it seems like your glove is just normally oiled." I was sickened by that, but for my family I felt I had to do it. I had an even harder time, a much harder time, with the manager's third ask. "You're making $750 a week, and only for the season's 4 months. How'd you like to make an extra 20 grand without having to work any harder? In fact, you'd work less hard." For a moment I thought that just maybe I was being called up to the bigs, but I knew I wasn't good enough yet for that. It had to be something hinky. The manager said, "I need you to ease up during a few games. Just throw less hard, walk a few more guys. You can't do it every game. The monitors will catch on. So do it today. Then pitch normally for 2 games, then do it again. Then wait 3 games and do it one more time. And then $20,000 ka-ching." I discussed it with my wife. That story is called Throwing. The next one is called My First Wet Dream. It was when I was 11. I woke up to find sticky wet stuff on my private parts, and there was so much of it that it spilled onto the sheet and blanket. I was so embarrassed. Was I wetting the bed again like I did when I was younger? This was worse. It was sticky. Well, maybe it wasn't worse. Remember the bedwetting and the pee smelled. Anyway, I didn't want to tell my parents, so for once I made my bed so I could cover the mess with the bedspread. But that night, my mother said, "Don't worry, it's normal." I asked, "Will I do that every night?" She said, "Maybe, for a while." "What is it?" She said, "It's natural and it happens to boys of your age." I felt confused, embarrassed, and I went to my room to play Super Mario. But when I went to bed, I was scared, and that night it happened again. And I decided to this time ask a kid I know who's a year older than me. "Yeah, that's what you make babies with." "How do you do that?" "You stick it in a girl's pussy." "With your fingers?" "Your dick, dickhead." "How do I keep from messing up my bed?" "You wear a rubber." What's a rubber?" "It's a balloon you wear on your dick." I guess I have a lot to learn. Anyway, that story is called My First Wet Dream. The next story is called Faith Shaken. The pastor sat in the parish house preparing his sermon. Like most clerics, he occasionally had a crisis of faith, but found it easier to minister by not focusing on that, especially when sermonizing. A major purpose of the church is to comfort the faithful, and expressing doubt rarely does that. So the pastor decided to give his sermon on how God comforts even when inexplicably bad things happen. He began, "We are all understandably shaken by what's happening to the poor people of Ukraine. How could an omnipotent, loving God allow that? We find an answer in Scripture. I read from Philippians 4, 6, and 7. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." So, dear parishioners, and at that moment the church shook. Fortunately, the earthquake caused only minor damage, but that raised the doubts about a loving, omnipotent God, at least in a few parishioners, and yes, in the pastor. He had to decide then whether greater good would accrue if, in continuing the sermon, acknowledging his doubt, or would he be wiser to express gratitude for God sparing the church from greater harm? What would you do? So that's called Faith Shaken. The next story is called Black First, Then Red. Sean wanted a promotion. No, he needed a promotion. He was burned out on being a beat cop, and even though police pay was high in the Bay Area, rent was still higher. Sean's mentor advised, "They're always looking for people for the bomb squad, and mainly you just sit around. There aren't that many bombs to dismantle. Take the course." Sean did, and was taught that bomb dismantling is less complicated than it might seem. Mainly, you just have to first cut the black wire that connects to the detonator, and only then the red wire. Sean applied for the next opening in the bomb squad, and to his surprise, was hired over people with experience. Maybe I did really well in the interview. Indeed, in Sean's 2 months on the job, there were no bombs to dismantle. The squad just did simulations. Find the detonator, cut the black wire, then the red one. Easy peasy. Then off duty on a Saturday night, Sean took his daughter to a concert. A row ahead, from a backpack that was underneath the seat, he heard ticking. Sean used his foot to slide the backpack toward him. The ticking was louder. He pulled the backpack's zipper to see inside. It was a bomb, and it was easy to find its detonator. Then he saw that the 2 wires were purple and orange. Anyway, that's what's called Black First, Red Second. I should let you know what you're listening to. This is an episode of How to Do Life, and I'll just take a brief break so the announcer can do her thing. I hope you will stay with me. Okay, I do thank you for staying with me. The next short story is from my book Soloists. It's called Reduction. Dominique couldn't allow herself to doubt her decision. After all, she had paid so many dues. Expensive culinary school, sous chef, which is mainly a vegetable chopper, associate chef at a mid-range restaurant, and finally, executive chef there, her dream come true. But slowly, Dominique couldn't suppress her doubts. Even being the head chef got boring. You had to make the same dishes again and again. Because she had to work nights and weekends, her social life consisted mainly of hanging out with the restaurant staff after the last patrons had left. Most dispiriting was the pretense. Does boeuf tornadoes with a balsamic reduction really taste that much better than a good burger, even if they were the same price, which they definitely are not? But what put Dominique over the edge was when a waiter tossed back a part-eaten plate. Table 17 says he wants his quail medium rare, and this was medium. Back at her apartment, Dominique told the quail story to her roommate, who was a waiter at Hash House, a basic breakfast joint. Babe, our customers would never send your food back, and my boss would hire you in a minute. She's trying to upgrade the image to appeal to the middle class. She'd treat you like a queen. Just talk to her. Because it was a breakfast place, Dominique would be off at noon and so could have a normal social life, so she agreed to try it. But working with frozen hash brown patties, powdered eggs, and cost-right all-in-one pancake and waffle mix felt like a violation of all she had committed to. She also was frustrated by the sous chef so often calling in sick, and in those cases Dominique had to go back to being the vegetable chopper. So after just one day at Hash House, she wondered whether she should search for another dream. So that story is called Reduction. The next story is called A Free Throw. Nicole played basketball with her brother on the tilty backboard in front of their apartment building and became confident in her game. So when she reached the 9th grade, she tried out for her high school team and was picked, but spent most of the time on the bench. The big game was against the crosstown rival. For the first time, Nicole's parents both came, plus the guy Nicole has a crush on. Through the first 3 quarters, as usual, Nicole sat on the bench. But it was a war, and with 2 minutes left in the game, the 4th of her teammates fouled down. Even though the game was close, the coach had no choice but to put Nicole in. With 5 seconds left in the game tied, the opposing team's coach called time and whispered to her players, "Number 23 looks very young and has been on the bench until all her teammates fouled out like that. Foul her." With 1 second left, Nicole indeed got fouled. As she approached the free throw line, her breathing got shallow. She thought, do your pre-throw routine, breathe, bounce the ball 3 times, breathe, feel the ball well, wave as you shoot, smoothly. She started the routine, but then the opposing coach called another timeout to ice Nicole. When she returned to the free throw line, her hand was shaking. She did her routine, but then flashed on everyone who was watching, screaming. Before she could even get more freaked out, she shot. It hit the side of the rim, rolled around, and what do you hope happened? So that one's called a free throw. Next story is called My Professional Nag. I'm good in science and math, and everyone's always pushing me to do something with those, but to be honest, I don't like math. So now, when I should be studying for the AP Calculus test, that's advanced placement, even though if I get at least a 3, I wouldn't have to take it in college, I'm procrastinating. My parents yell at me, I yell at me, and I can't make myself study. So, when in the cafeteria this Hulk was passing out flyers, Nat, your professional nag, $10 an hour, I said, can you make me study for the AP Calculus test? He said, you'll come to hate me. And I said, sounds good. And I did come to hate him. His typical way of motivating me, I'm not letting you out of this fucking chair until you put in a half hour. I tried to play him by pretending to be thinking about the calculus questions on my screen, but actually was thinking about the fun I'd have at college. But it wasn't 10 seconds before he yelled, do not give me that shit. Nothing really worked until he said, quietly for once, you know, Angela, you're just like those other dumbass girls. There used to be a song that was the truth. Girls just want to have fun. I screamed, get the hell out of here, and he strode out. Somehow that made me study, and I got a 4 on the test, and I think I might, I'm just saying might, take another math class in college. So that one was called My Professional Nag. The next one's called Restored. I may be the only classic car collector who isn't rich. Actually, my collection consists of just one car, a '64 Ford Mustang. I always liked old things, but could never dream of owning a classic car. I just work at an auto body shop. But one day, a '64 Mustang got towed in, smashed on all four sides. One look, and I had to tell him it was definitely a total. I said, "You can sell it for parts. You probably can get $5,000. But the car owner said, "I don't have time for all that. What would you give me for it?" I said, "Well, I don't have the money now, but if you give me a week or two, I probably can scrape up $2,000, maybe $2,500. He said, "Two will do." And that's how I got my classic car. Of course, that was just the beginning. Where I could, I pulled, I welded, I bondoed, but I had to buy one door panel, two rear panels, a bumper, and a bunch of doodads. Of course, I got them used online or at junkyards. I would call local ones every week. And in 3 months, I got what I needed. Total cost $3,400 with everything original. I was proud of myself. The one thing I didn't choose original was paint. I like silver, and the '64's original color was a dull gray, smoky gray. Because I work at a body shop, I got a deal on pearly silver, and with the clear coat on top, I was so happy for a few months. Then one day I'm driving, and like an idiot, I'm looking on my phone to find a Maroon 5 album, and I didn't see the other idiot who ran a red light and smashed into me. We both were all right, but because I was partly at fault, after the insurance check, to fix it, I'd still have to lay out another $2,000, plus all the time it takes. Having restored it before, it would no longer be as much fun, but the thought of giving it up and getting something I could afford, like some 2000 Nissan Sentra, felt boring. I still don't know what I'm going to do. So anyway, that one is called Restored. The next one is called Checking. I was never much for school and didn't really know how to look for a job. So when I saw the help wanted sign in front of the supermarket, I applied and got hired. They started me mainly shelving, but they saw that I liked people, so they promoted me to checker. But that soon got boring. It's a line that never ends, and all you have to do is scan and bag, occasionally look up a produce code or ask for ID for alcohol. Even chatting with customers got boring. Mainly it was, "Did you find everything you wanted?" Or something about the weather. So I let my mind wander. Will my job get automated? I don't care much. Should I try to become a manager? Maybe. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'd like bossing people around. I'm getting tired of being nice. That customer is cute. I hope she gets in my line. I hate that we're not allowed to date customers. Next, I tried offering copies of recipes that were on the supermarket's website to customers who bought at least one of the ingredients. The customers seemed to like that. Unfortunately, my boss stopped me. He said, "What if you end up with more people in your line than the other checkers have? It would make them feel bad, and no, it's not realistic to ask them all to give recipes or otherwise do their own thing, if only because someone would likely file an unequal treatment grievance. I'm thinking of shorting the change to cash customers who aren't paying attention." So that's called checking. Next story is called Running Away. Yes, my family is middle class. And yes, I'm male. No, I'm not black. I'm Asian. Does that make me privileged? My great-parents, my great-grandparents, immigrated from Japan and were put in internment camps. My father worked for every dollar, and he got paid reasonably well because he added that much value. I got rejected from my first and second choice high school, while black kids not only got admitted, but got, quote, scholarships. It's a phony term. Their grades and test scores made them worse, quote, scholars than me. And they were in my classes, and I swear to you, they were dumber than a lot of other kids in the class. In school, all we hear about is our privilege and how we oppress people of color, and somehow, as an Asian, I don't count. I then get home and get the same message from TV, from books, from magazines. Black is good or victim. Asian and especially white males, evil or clueless, usually both. Shown up by a female or minority, usually both. Even my parents told me I'm privileged, so I ran away. I wanted to get downtown, I'm not sure why, so I hitched, and a beer truck driver picked me up. He said, "You look sad, kid." "I'm all right." Right. Everyone hates me. Why? I wish I was a black girl. Give me a break. Look at all the CEOs, and until Barack, the presidents were all white men. Give me a break. I think I'll get out here. Good idea. So that story is called Running Away. Next story is called Birth and Death. Yes, I had told Victoria I wanted children, and at the time I did. I was infatuated with her and with the idea of having and raising a child, and maybe having someone to care for us in our old age. The desire to have kids was fueled by our friends who had them. They emphasized the positives, if only not to seem cold or like bad parents. And of course, our grandparents were salivating for grandkids. But then worries intruded. Bye-bye freedom. Waking up in the middle of the night. Fighting with the kid about homework. Will I even be a good parent? My job isn't that secure. Can we afford to have a baby? And what if our baby isn't normal? I decided to not say any of this to Vicky. I could just imagine her reaction. What? You said you wanted a baby. So what do you want me to do now? Get an abortion? No. I could picture her screaming, then crying, then miserable through her pregnancy and blaming me forever for spoiling her motherhood. My worry about an abnormal baby was justified. Lou Jr. was born with an APGAR score of 6, which predicts low IQ. The first time Vicky and I had sex after Lou was born, my erection wasn't as hard as usual. And over the next months, I became softer and softer until I couldn't have intercourse. In frustration, Victoria said, "You're doing this to punish me." Of course, that wasn't true, and I got so angry that I did something I thought I'd never do. I slapped her in the face, hard. Even in retrospect, I sort of feel she deserved it, but I do recognize that hitting a woman is strictly verboten. In the next months, we didn't even try to have sex, and our relationship declined further, in part because we didn't have sex there to balm life's problems. And atop regular problems, there was Lou, who was difficult, low IQ or not. He was what Victoria called fussy, and what I thought was an understatement. And yes, once at 3 a.m., when Lou was already 6 months old, and he was up yelling half the night, and when I finally got to bed, exhausted after unsuccessfully trying to calm him, I actually said it. "You know, Vicky, Lou is a nightmare." And Victoria seethed. She said, "That hurts even more than the slap, much more." A month later, Vicky expanded on a Lorena bobbit. She poisoned my dinner and then, with the help of my electric saw, cut me up, threw me down the garbage disposal, and got away with it. She simply told the cops that I had gone for a walk and never returned. The investigation turned up nothing, so the cops assumed it was just another case of a spouse walking out, and they tossed the case into the cold case file. I'm writing to you from purgatory, hoping that Vicky feels at least ambivalent about what she did. So that story is called Birth and Death. This next story is called My Triplets. "You're going to have triplets." And my face dropped. My lifetime dream was to become a doctor, and I killed myself to get a 3.5 GPA, took an expensive MCAT prep course, got a good score, and worked every summer in a hospital. In the summer before I was supposed to start medical school, I got pregnant, with triplets no less, and I'm Catholic. No, I'm not completely against abortion, just leaning against it. But if I had the child and kept it, I feared I wouldn't have enough energy to do medical school, let alone be a good doctor. On the other hand, if I gave up the triplets for adoption, it's hard to imagine the mother being as good to my kids as I would have been. I decided to be Solomonic about it. I had a fetal reduction. I aborted one baby, had the other two, kept one of those, and found an amazing mom and dad for the third. And now, you guessed it, I'm an obstetrician specializing in fetal reduction. So that story is called My Triplets. The next story is called I Shouldn't Be Sad. I shouldn't be sad. I'm healthy, have good relationships, and a stable government job that pays okay, with full benefits, even a pension. But I am sad. I've thought about why. I think it's mainly because I feel I've lost my individuality. At least here in the San Francisco Bay Area, we have to have the same political beliefs, down to using mass transit over cars or we get dirty looks or worse. We're expected to wear dull colors, grays, browns, black. If I were to wear, say, bright yellow, some people would perceive me as a Pollyanna in a serious time that demands major changes, even revolution. My coworkers and I get the same pay, whether we work minimally or maximally. Messages, especially from HR, are filled with words like together, collective, and all in. We're told again and again to collaborate, get group input, develop consensus, that there's no I in team, and that it's we, not me. I used to take pride in my individuality. Now I'm a little guilty even thinking about myself as an individual, wondering if it's selfish to think that. I'm finding myself ever sadder, feeling a little like the pictures I've seen of despondent people in the Soviet era. I'm just caring less. So most days after work I say acceptable things to my wife and smoke a joint. That is considered acceptable. So that story was I Shouldn't Be Sad. This one is called Pimply Shrimpy. I was the shortest kid in my 5th grade class, and the other kids let me know it. First they started calling me Little Lenny, which didn't bother me much. But when they called me Shrimpy, and then when I got my first zit, Pimply Shrimpy, and they did it all the time, I was sad. One day after school, I went up to my boy cave up in the attic, where I liked to read fantasy books. My favorite was The Wizard of Oz. I thought I must be imagining, but a wall opened with a hole just big enough for little me to crawl through. I was scared, but it felt like I was in one of my fantasy books, which ended happily. So I crawled in, and suddenly I was in a new world, filled with flowers, pink sky, and this is the important part. I was much bigger than any of them, much bigger. Them meaning the residents of this world. As soon as they saw me, they ran away, scared. I took a step toward them, careful not to step on anyone. And before they could all get away, I said, "Please stop. Where I come from, I'm the littlest person. Don't worry, I won't harm you." And they soon trusted that I was big but harmless, and they asked me to help them build a new palace for the emperor. We tore down the old one and built a golden-domed new one with the floors in pink marble. When we were done, I stepped back and was amazed at how magnificent it is. But then I asked myself, and then them, why does the emperor need a new palace? None of the people answered. Then I asked, why does an emperor need a palace at all? Silence. I sat on the lawn in front of the palace and thought about that. Thought about whether I should turn around and go home. What big kids and little kids must feel like, and whether I'd still feel bad if they called me Pimply Shrimpy. That story is called Pimply Shrimpy. Next story is called Suddenly Old. Clarissa's discipline had paid off. She became the Midwest Ballet Theater's principal ballerina, having sacrificed her childhood. She fought her tendency to gain weight with an anorexic ballet diet in which she recorded every one of her 900 calories a day and posted her weight daily on Facebook. She practiced ballet 6 hours a day and felt she was a slacker when she practiced only 2 hours on Christmas Day. In her 50s, that discipline enabled Clarissa to get selected for major roles in the National Senior Ballet Company. But at 56, she started to have pain in her hip. She thought it was normal aging, but it was arthritis, rapidly progressing arthritis. Within 6 months, she went from limber dancer to limping old lady. Her doctor was optimistic that a hip replacement would fully restore her, but that turned out to be optimistic. After the 3-month, often painful recovery, yes, she could walk, but her dancing days were over. Dancing had been her entire life, so she tried teaching dance, but was frustrated at students' lack of discipline. She tried managing a dance studio, but was frustrated with teachers, students, and parents. 2 years later, she developed arthritis in her other hip and in the knee, and is taking pain medication for those and facing more surgery. She thought, I thought you get old gradually. I felt young, and then poof, I'm old. In the supermarket for the first time in decades, Clarissa stared at the ice cream section. So that's called Suddenly Old. Next one's called I Hate Myself. A lot of the time I hate myself. I hate my belly. I can't believe that at age 16 I'm already a little overweight. Why can't I be like the other girls who can eat the school lunch without blimping out? I also hate the way I think. Girls wear t-shirts like "Women Rule," "The Future is Female," and "Unstoppable," but I feel quite stoppable. And I feel guilty about thinking, let alone saying, that a guy would get hell, pointing out that a guy would get hell for wearing a t-shirt that said "Men Rule" or that the future is male. And I feel guilty that I'm biased against a Southern accent, whether the person is white or black. And I'm confused. My ethnic studies teachers say that making generalizations based on our limited data is racist. Yet our science and math teachers urge us to make generalizations based on limited data. I remember my statistics teacher saying something like, "We must make inferences based on modest samples. Statistics enable us to do that validly. If we waited for massive data, we'd be still living in caves." So I feel safer in my science and math classes, but I still feel guilty and hate myself sometimes. So that story is I hate myself. The next story is called Read or Live. Danny had been knocked down in life's first 9 rounds, and so didn't want to come out for the 10th. He had been fired 3 times, first for being a know-it-all, then for refusing to follow rules he thought were wrong or inapplicable, and then for openly disagreeing with his boss. His first wife divorced him because he gave her hell for being a spender. His second wife hated that he was a slob. His third wife was frustrated by his ever-declining sex drive. He was unsuccessful with friends, even though he thought he curated them well. They mainly wanted to talk about travel, sports, pop culture, and family. And he didn't just care much about that. He cared about ideas. But when he brought up his favorite contrarian but defensible positions, not only did few people agree with him or even become neutral, they often grew angry. So he found himself wanting to see people less and less. So Danny started to be a reader. He figured he'd start with intelligent classics, but he found literature boring, difficult, or just less appealing than what he could otherwise do with his time. That was true of Faulkner and Joyce, Eliot, Mann, Trollope, even Shakespeare. He figured he might do better with modern classics, so he tried Invisible Man, Underworld, Love in the Time of Cholera, Infinite Jest, The Collections, and Beloved. No luck. His next try was top nonfiction, The God Delusion, Moneyball, and A Swim in the Pond in the Rain. Not those either. He dropped down to mainstream fiction, for example, Well Schooled in Murder and Winter Solstice. Better, but still. Now, next it was short form, and he found a book called The Best Short Stories of All Time. Still not quite. Finally, he swallowed his ego and tried top-rated young adult novels. The Fault is in Our Stars, The Hunger Games, and even a cozy mystery, Hot and Sour Suspects. Danny's frenzied effort to find more satisfaction from text than from life, for no apparent reason, stopped. As he was searching Goodreads for his next book, he just stopped, stared, and wondered, should I go back to real life? Anyway, so that story is called Read or Live. And the next and final story is called The Refund. He hated black tie, but it was expected. After all, he was the university's president, and this was the annual fund's glittery gala, $500 a plate, plus lots of bidding at the auction expected. For example, on a signed Joe Montana football and a week at a Maui condo. He gave the usual inspire the donors speech, highlighted by the story of a kid, the first in the family to go to college and now is a doctor. And all it took to get her to come to the gala was a free dinner and a small honorarium he would pay back manyfold. He was ready for the Q&A, questions about the job market for graduates, the football team's prospects, maybe even a polite question about the curriculum like, do you think we're preparing students for the real world? And he got that one, and he trotted out the mollifying, we prepare students to think, to be responsible citizens, and become connoisseurs of life. We prepare students not just to succeed in their career, but in life. He only half believed all that. But then he got a question he wasn't prepared for and definitely didn't like. The question was, students are learning or at least being taught remotely. No extracurricular life, which is a huge part of college, often what enables students to endure academics. How come you don't give students at least a 50% discount during this remote year, and what promises to be the same next year? He thought, boy, that audience member is right, but if I agree, the board could fire me. But can I live with myself if I make excuses like fixed cost of running a university, stay, and the cost of preparing faculty to teach well remotely. What did I say? I summoned my college presidential gravitas and intoned, I appreciate that good question, and it's one that we're carefully weighing. We hope to have new information to share with you before long. Anyway, those are 21 stories from my book Soloists, 79 stories of people who try to make it by themselves. I welcome your thumbs up and accept your thumbs down. I always look forward to your comments, and especially like it if you hit the share button below. Share on your social media so that my efforts can have broader impact. And I am flattered if you choose to subscribe to my channel. In any event, I do thank you for watching or listening. And if you are listening, I like to end every podcast with this quote from Frank A. Clark, which I believe is more relevant now than ever. We find comfort among those who agree with us, growth among those who don't.